Good afternoon. My name is Anwar. I will be teaching you the writing skill from Unit 1. Right, we're going to open to page 22. Right, so we're going to start with the first part of the explanation, the writing skill, organizing and developing an essay. It says an analysis essay examines a topic by breaking it down into smaller parts. Remember that an essay includes an introduction, one or more body paragraphs, and a conclusion. So the three main parts that you need to remember is number one, we first start with the introduction. Now, what is the introduction? The introduction, this paragraph should make the reader interested in your topic. It usually includes a hook to catch the reader's attention. It also provides background information or general statements about the topic. Within the introduction paragraph, include a thesis statement. The thesis statement contains the topic and all the controlling ideas, a specific idea or an opinion about the topic of the essay. It tells the reader the purpose of the essay. Now, for example, a thesis statement. If you were to use the sentence, a role model inspires people to do their best. The first part, a role model, is the topic. The controlling idea inspires people to do their best. That is an example of a thesis statement. Now, the next part we are going to move on to, which is the body paragraphs. It says for each body paragraph, include a topic sentence that states the topic of the paragraph and the controlling idea. Add supporting sentences that provide as much detail as possible to fully develop your thesis. Use supporting sentences that all relate to or develop the topic to create unity. Organize the supporting sentences in a logical way so there is a clear connection between the ideas to create coherence. Often transition words like first, in addition, and for example are used to show the relationship between supporting ideas. Now, this is the explanation of the body paragraphs. Now, you need to understand the body paragraphs has to match one another. You cannot go off the topic. You have to stick to the topic of the essay. So, the last part, which we will deal with, is the conclusion. The conclusion brings the essay to a close. This paragraph may restate the thesis statement in different words, summarize the main points, or do both. Write sentences that remind the reader of why he or she is reading the essay. You can also use the conclusion to help your reader look beyond the essay or think about further ideas that relate to your topic. Right, so that is the writing skill, the explanation of the writing skill. Now, let's go through it one more time. So, there are three parts of this writing skill. Right, organizing and developing an essay. Part 1, we are going to talk about the introduction. The introduction is the paragraph that basically tells the reader what the essay is about. It explains to the reader what the essay is about. The next part, which we have covered, is the body paragraphs. The body paragraphs, it explains to the reader part by part according to how many paragraphs you add. It explains to the reader what the essay is about, and it helps the reader to understand what you are trying to say in this essay. And the last part, which is the conclusion part of the essay, the conclusion part basically summarizes the entire essay and it brings the topic to a close, giving the reader a way of understanding what the essay was about and giving them some conclusion as to giving them some way of understanding how this essay will now end. So that is page 22. We are going to now move on to page 23. Right, in page 23, exercise A, they have given you a writing model. It says read the model essay, then follow the steps below. The model essay is about successful people. So you will read this essay about successful people, and then you will answer the questions below that about the essay. Right, so when you are finished with that, we will now move on to the next page, which is page 24. We will do exercise C. Now, exercise C, it says work with a partner. Unfortunately, if you are doing this course online, you will not have a partner. It says read the sentences and number them to make a meaningful body paragraph. First, identify the topic sentence. Then order the supporting sentences to create unity and coherence. Then write the whole paragraph in order and check for unity and coherence. Now, what do they mean by unity and coherence? Now, you need to be able to read every single point from A up until H, and you need to be able to decide in which order does each sentence go. Now, obviously, if you have a sentence that begins with firstly or first, immediately you know that is the first event that is happening in this essay. So what we are going to do, you are going to look at the alphabet and you are going to number it according to how you feel the essay goes. They have done the first one for you. They have done D, which is the third sentence. So they have written number 3 next to D. So this is how you will do this exercise. When you are finished with this exercise, you can then go to the answer page and you can check your answers. Let's look at the next exercise, which is exercise D. It says the paragraph in activity C is the body paragraph for an essay about role models and mentors. Answer the questions. Now, once you are finished with exercise C, you will then have a paragraph that explains to you information about role models. So exercise C will actually help you answer exercise D. Let's look at the first question in exercise D. It says list some possible hooks for an introduction to this paragraph. Now you are going to read exercise C as a paragraph and you are going to answer exercise D. Number 1, list some possible hooks for an introduction to this paragraph. Once you read the paragraph, you will decide which are some possible hooks. So you will complete question 1, 2, and 3. Now we will move on to the next page, which is page 25. Now on page 25, we have the grammar section. Now the grammar we are going to do today, it is called restrictive relative clauses. Number 1, restrictive relative clauses describe or identify nouns. Usually they directly follow nouns, noun phrases, or indefinite pronouns. For example, something, everyone. Right, I'm going to give you an example. A role model is someone who makes a difference in people's lives. Now, if you look at the first part of the sentence, a role model is someone. Someone is an example of a pronoun who makes a difference in people's lives. The second part of the sentence, who makes a difference in people's lives, is called an adjective clause. Now, that is an example of a restrictive relative clause, adjective clause. Let's look at the next example. Role models face questions that we may also face. If you look at this example, role models face questions. Now, questions is an example of a noun. That we may also face is an example of an adjective clause. Number 2, most relative clauses begin with a relative pronoun. Use who or that after nouns for people. For example, role models are people who may volunteer in their communities. Now, if you look at the word who may, or the word who may, it is used after we mention people. Let's look at the next example. Ordinary people that we each know can be role models. Now, if you look at that example, you will see that it follows the same formula where we have taken ordinary people, which are nouns, and we have put the word that after people, which is we. Ordinary people that we each know can be role models. Now, it says below that, use that or which after nouns for things, which usually sounds more formal. For example, biographies that tell stories of successful people are very popular. Role models do things that we would like to do. Sarah works for a company which helps the homeless. Now let's look at the first example. Biographies that tell stories of successful people are very popular. Now, the instruction tells you, use that or which after nouns for things. Now, the first word, biographies, is a noun for something. It is a name of something. Biography, biographies. So immediately we use the word that, which follows the noun. Biographies that tell stories of successful people are very popular. If you look at the next example, right, we're going to move on to number 3. It says you can think of a sentence with a relative clause as a combination of two sentences about the same noun. It says in a subject relative clause, the relative pronoun stands for the subject of the clause. It is followed by a verb. For example, a role model is someone, full stop, makes a difference in people's lives. So immediately you would write what? You would write a role model is someone that makes a difference in people's lives. Let's look at the next example. You can also use a role model is someone who makes a difference in people's lives. If you look at who makes, the subject is who and the verb is makes. A role model is someone who makes a difference in people's lives. Below that, it says in an object relative clause, the relative pronoun stands for the object of the clause. The relative pronoun is followed by a subject plus verb. For example, you could say role models face questions that we may also face. Now, if you look at the second part of this example, it says that we may also face. It is the object, right, which is the word that, plus the subject, which is the word we, and then they have put may also face. Now the word may becomes the verb. So immediately that entire part of the sentence, that we may also face, becomes object plus the subject plus the verb, right? Now if you look at number 4, it says in object relative clauses, the relative pronoun can be omitted. For example, ordinary people that we each know can be role models. Now, if you remove the word that, you could say ordinary people we each know can be role models. We have removed the word that. If you look at the next example, it says role models do things that we would like to do. Role models do things that we would like to do. If you remove the word that, you could say role models do things we would like to do. Now that is an example of omitting the pronoun. So in object relative clauses, the relative pronoun can be omitted. You can basically remove the pronoun from the sentence. It also says also called identifying adjective clauses. So instead of calling it objective or object relative clauses, it can also be called identifying adjective clauses. Now, we are going to turn over to the next page, page 26. Right, we are going to look at exercise A. Now, in exercise A, it says underline the relative clause in each sentence. Circle the noun, noun phrase, or indefinite pronoun it identifies. Now, I'm going to look at number one. Right, number one, we are going to attempt the first one together, or we are going to do the example sentence. Number one, it says, not every person who makes his or her community a better place is acknowledged for it. Now, if you look at that sentence, now what does the instruction say? The instruction says, underline the relative clause in each sentence. Circle the noun, noun phrase, or indefinite pronoun it identifies. So if you look at the first one, not every person who makes his or her community a better place is acknowledged for it. They have immediately circled it for you. Who makes his or her community a better place is the relative clause. And if you look at the type of noun, which is person, they have circled it. So for each sentence they have given you from number 2 up until number 7, you will do the same. You will follow the same instruction. Now we are going to move on. I will explain exercise B for you. Exercise B says combine each pair of sentences using a restrictive relative clause with who, that, or which. Use the words in bold to help you. Now you have to remember one key rule. A restrictive relative clause is a clause or word that will help you connect information. You have to remember that it will help you connect information. So if you are using a type of clause and you feel that you haven't connected the information in the right way, it is perfectly fine to use vocab that may not be mentioned in this exercise. Let's look at the first one, number 1. It says we all aspire to do something, full stop. Other people will respect it. Now, the correct answer for that, we all aspire to do something that other people will respect. Immediately, we have added the word that, which is our relative clause, to connect the information. So, the question was, or the incorrect one was, we all aspire to do something, full stop. Other people will respect it. The correct answer, we all aspire to do something that other people will respect. So you will complete from number 2 up until number 7, and that will complete exercise B. Right, and then lastly, on page 27, which is the next page, you have the vocabulary, which I personally feel will improve your overall English learning experience if you can just go through the vocab and try your best to understand what each word means. So in Track Your Success, it says circle the words and phrases you have learned in this unit. My personal opinion, you should go through each word and you should see how well you understand the meaning of that word, and then find a way or look for a way you can possibly add that word in a sentence of your own. So we're going to go back to the beginning just to quickly summarize. Right, so the first part, which was on page 22, was the writing skill. The writing skill, our objectives in this is learning how to organize and develop an essay. So we said there are 3 parts of an essay. There is the introduction part, there is the body paragraphs, and there is the conclusion part. So you have to understand the 3 parts. You can obviously read through the explanation they give you in the book. This is very important to understand. Then the second part, which we covered, which is the grammar part of the writing. The grammar that we are covering is restrictive relative clauses. You have to understand what are restrictive relative clauses and you have to understand how to use them, which obviously is explained throughout page 25. And lastly, we have the exercises that you need to do, exercise A and B on page 26. And then we have track your success, which is vocabulary, on page 27. And that completes unit 1.